Started if everyone could find a seat. Okay, just a couple logistical things before I introduce our speaker, Ayesha Khanna. If everyone could silence their cell phones, that would be awesome. And we actually encourage you guys to use them throughout. If you have questions, you can text your questions to IST Startup space 22333 or tweet your questions with the hashtag IST Startup. And then also, we're going to be taking pictures throughout the session, so if you're uncomfortable, feel free to move towards the back and come speak with me about it afterwards. Okay, so our speaker today, Ayesha Khanna, she is the president of the Points of Light Civic Incubator, which is the world's largest organization dedicated to volunteer service. As part of this role, she founded the Civic Accelerator and oversees the organization's global efforts. Ms. Khanna has worked across sectors and led profit, nonprofit, for-profit, and political organizations. She's a co-founder of the startup Fuse Courts, co-led Atlanta Women for Obama, and also led and transformed several leading nonprofit organizations after building healthcare centers in central India and beginning her career at Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture. She holds an MA from Columbia University and a BA from Franklin and Marshall College.
Yeah, Franklin and Marshall. Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm really excited to be with you today, particularly given what you all focus on in this class, which is emerging technologies and the impact on culture and how emerging technologies are helping to inform and shape and immerse in our culture. And as Becky said, I've jumped around a lot in my career. So one way of talking about it is saying I'm a tri-sector athlete that had all this intention about where I was going in life, and I have a thread through all I've done. Another way of describing my career is that I've just, kind of attracted to work with interesting people and interesting ideas, and actually did jump around a lot. And I think the latter description is more accurate. And is really consistent with where you're going to be going. You all are going to be having 10, 12 different careers in your lifetime. It'll be unusual for any of you to stay in 6 years in any one place. And as I think about it, that's kind of what I've done. I've sort of moved around. So I've worked in for-profit, nonprofit, public. I've done some organizing work, and I'm really excited to be at Points of Light now because I can bring all of that to bear in the work we're doing in the Civic Incubator. So I want to talk a little bit about my perspective and share some insights that I've gained working with the civic startups around the country. So I want to talk a little bit about technology and how we're seeing it influencing and changing the way people are connecting and mobilizing to make change happen. But really then want to get into some conversation and dialogue and hear your questions. So really glad to be part of Startup Week. I think this is awesome. First time ever that I've been on Penn State's campus. But I did grow up in Philadelphia, so it's just good to be near home. So with that, I'm going to dive right in, and I do want to thank your fabulous Professor Lynette. We had a chance to talk together and talk about the syllabus and where you're going, and I'm really looking forward to contributing to the learning that you've had as part of this course. So let's dive in, and let me share some of what I've seen and some of my perspective, and then let's get talking, which is, I think, where the fun comes out, and we'll really learn. Connecting with others is really a part of being human from the very early days. This is a photograph of my daughter a couple minutes after she was born. And I remember looking really deeply into her eyes. What I later learned is that babies don't really see in their first week of life. In fact, all they see are broad shapes. And so she was connecting with the shape of my face, and she was recognizing my voice, but she really wasn't looking deeply into my eyes. But I had never felt as deep a connection to anything, to anybody, as I did in those moments. And that was similar to the way I felt when I was working with kids in India. One of my students in India, Hemant, would only scream and shout when he was in the classroom because he was so excited to learn. And so all day it was, Ayesha Didi, Ayesha Didi, Ayesha Didi. Didi means sister in Hindi. But he and I were really different. But we had an amazing connection. And I lost touch with Hemeth after I left India and with many of the kids that I taught there. But remember him and each one of them so clearly. I mean, I loved him. And so we had a deep connection, a really meaningful connection. And we go through our lives in this way, right? We meet people during your time here at Penn State. You connect with them really deeply. They have an impact on you, but then you move on in life. But they're formative. Those are formative relationships, and they stay with us. Yet, if that kind of connection is so innate, why does it feel like we're becoming more disconnected? We live in segregated neighborhoods. Many of us drive alone in cars to work. You may walk alone with headphones when you come to class. We drive home to gated communities. We tend to spend time with people that look like us, and we tend to listen to people that sound like us, whether it's on talk radio or cable. In fact, many of us live in a place called Facetopia by an Atlanta tech journalist, where we read posts from people that are like us. And so we're not being exposed to people with very different beliefs. We're living in this virtual feedback loop where we're only seeing people, spending time with people, and hearing from people that are very much like us. As you know, when we walk to class, when we walk in the streets, it's really disconcerting when you're walking by people who are laughing and talking and smiling, but into their phones, right? So they're not making eye contact. We're not connecting even when we're walking down the street. And that's the norm now. Some of the trends that are described in Bowling Alone that was published in 2000 seem to be increasing. How many of you have heard of the term bowling alone or the book? Okay. So the author, Robert Putnam, and it was a seminal book it's older now, it's 15 years ago, but he's still a social scientist and very, very prolific and has written a lot. So Robert Putnam wrote about the fact that he went around the country in 2000. And what he found is, and he focused on one particular area, so it's a little strange, but he found that more people than ever before were bowling, right, than they had ever in their history. But because civic institutions had gone away, places where we gather had gone away, community centers had gone away, more people were bowling alone. So this idea that we are not connecting and that human connection is going away, and that all those places and spaces where we used to convene together have gone. Physically, where we used to convene together. Volunteerism is on decline. Voting is at lowest percentages than it's ever been, particularly among millennials. Teens are texting an average of 60 texts a day, and that's average. Many teens text 100 to 200 times a day. Many of us, in fact, would rather text than walk around the corner to talk to someone in person. How many of you saw the movie or heard about the movie Her? Okay, yeah. So I remember watching that movie, right? And the protagonist in the movie falls in love with his operating system. And I remember watching that and thinking, she's really nice. I could see that. So technology is being humanized to the point, and we're talking about having relationships, deep relationships with our operating system. So what does this mean for human connection? And are we going in the wrong direction? It feels that way if you look at all the trends and you watch behavior. So yes, the experts are saying that the trends are going in a way that we're getting more disconnected, for sure. But I think people are overlooking a significant trend that's going to change the game, and that's the rise of civic ventures. And I'm in a particular place to have some insight around this, because I founded the Points of Light Civic Accelerator, and I get to work with many hundreds of civic entrepreneurs around the country. And so I'm working with these entrepreneurs who are using technology, and they're coming up with new thinking and ways to mobilize people, to connect people, to change the world. And because I work at Points of Light, and that's what our mission's about, I'm very focused on finding those new ways that people are connecting and new ways that technology is being used. So we talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs around the country. I've evaluated and met with over 1,000 startups, and to get into our 2 cohorts that we run a year, and 10 to 15 teams go through every year. And they're all focused on human connection, and they're rethinking what it means to be a citizen. And they're rethinking the way that we're connecting and working collectively, and how to be an active citizen, which is fundamentally changing. So it's a very exciting time to be talking about technology and the influence on culture and how it's fundamentally changing the way we're connecting. But is it a positive thing? Is it really ending the way we're connecting as human beings, or is it going to forward or move us forward as a society? And these entrepreneurs are figuring it out. And they're not alone, and they're not in a vacuum. There's a huge wave that's coming, and we're all going to be swept away in it. So we can now share our bikes, our apartments, our homes as part of the sharing community. So what if you had an apartment, or you're in the dorm and you don't want to buy something but you want to borrow it? So you want to borrow some chairs for a party or a tent or an iron, which I do not own, so I would need to borrow. One of our startups, one of our alumni from the Civic Accelerator, allows you to do that. Spare to Share is a platform that allows you, if you live in an apartment, to borrow from one another and create social capital. So a whole new way of connecting and sharing goods as consumers, and connecting with individuals in a whole different way, people that you wouldn't know. People can now come together online and pool their resources to focus on issues that they care about, or to create new solutions. So if you're in a neighborhood and you wanted to repair your park or sidewalks, one of our alumni, called Neighborly, allows you to do just that. It's a platform that allows you to go online and you enter a project that you want to take on in your neighborhood. It partners you with companies and municipal governments and allows you to take control and actually make a change happen in your neighborhood. An amazing model. If you are a youth group or a school and you can't afford uniforms, another startup that went through the Civic Accelerator, called Piggybacker, allows you to go online, and it is user-friendly for kids to go online and to do crowdfunding to support their teams and to engage adults that care about them. In many ways, it's a whole new way of community organizing, and it's for very young people. So there are kids on there as old as 8 years old who are launching their own fundraising campaigns in lower income neighborhoods around the country to bring resources to their schools and bring resources to their teams. Amazing innovation and new way of thinking about leveraging the crowd. If you want to make a contribution, you can now do that with a click. You can go online and donate or contribute. Another one of our Civic Accelerator alumni, TinyGive, allows you to go on Twitter, and if you see something that really energizes you, a national tragedy, a disaster, you can immediately go online and through a tweet donate and contribute right away. Just look at the awareness and the funds raised, over $100 million through the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. How many people participated in the Ice Bucket Challenge here? Raise them high, let's see. Wow, that's awesome. How many people heard about the Ice Bucket Challenge? ALS, like, okay, almost everyone. Great. That's an example of a new meme. So the new challenge meme, which is so much more powerful than those chain letters. that we used to get, which really, when you think about it, had limited value that we used to pass around. So an incredible new way that tech is enabling donations and pooling assets and pooling resources. Then there are things that we used to do passively, like watch TV. We can now vote on the very mundane, like our Best American Idol, or we can shape a TV plot. And there are more powerful ways of leveraging media. So groups like Participant Media that are connecting calls to action and themes around social impact and social issues to media and to film. If you look at their film An Inconvenient Truth or Food Inc., they've actually done dozens of movies that are connected to action. Another Civic Accelerator alumni called the Jubilee Project has a similar business model where they are sharing video and multimedia around issues that they're trying to galvanize people around. They get content from activists around the country, and it's a new way of launching campaigns and educating people around these issues. So really exciting the way passive viewing is evolving and changing, and the way we're activating individuals in a whole different way. So innovation is driving new ways of creating citizen power. So I think the experts are wrong. I think that this may look passive and disconnected, but it's actually a whole new way of connecting in a much deeper and more efficient way than ever before. We're not creating isolation, we're actually creating a new kind of human contact. And these new approaches are actually driving more human connection, not less. So we're not bowling alone, but we're bowling online and we're doing it as a party. So it's changed, and that connection has fundamentally changed. So my daughter just turned 10, and I was asking her what she wanted for her birthday, a couple weeks before her birthday, and she said to me she wanted a YouTube channel for her birthday present. And I thought, what does a 10-year-old want to say and share? But it's interesting. You know, she has a voice, and she wants to share it, and she wants to get feedback and sort of engage. And so when I think about when I was 10 years old, I mean, I was writing in a journal about, unfortunately, my parakeets that seemed to die every couple of weeks. So I was keeping this journal that was just for me and was insular, and now people are posting diaries and posting their innermost thoughts, and young people are sort of looking at that as a whole different way of connecting and communicating. So it's a new day. So we actually may be tapping into deeper connections more quickly than ever before, and on a scale unimaginable even 10 years ago, and so much more efficiently. When I was, as an example, walking on my way from the hotel to campus, I, on my phone, touched base with my mentor. I made a micro donation on the Give Quick app, another Civic Accelerator alumni, to a nonprofit that I wanted to support. I walked a little bit out of my way to go to Starbucks, a company whose values that I appreciate and align with, to get caffeine. And then I logged on to an Indiegogo campaign and supported solar panels for an orphanage in India on their latest campaign, all in 10 minutes. No organizing, no phone calls, no having to reach out to coordinate any of that. Isn't that using my voice, and isn't that using my power as a citizen to make a difference and to have impact? So maybe my daughter was onto something about her YouTube channel. And I remember when she was little just how tightly she hung on to my finger. These civic entrepreneurs are linking fingers around the world and are coming up with whole new ways to mobilize people and create virtual communities to make a difference. So if you want to support or start your own civic venture, civic solution, we'd love you to check us out. We're at civic-x.org. We know we're going to keep supporting and investing in these civic entrepreneurs because we think that they're coming up with solutions that are going to change the world in whole new different ways. They're leveraging technology in different ways, they're mobilizing people, and they are rethinking what it means to be a citizen and galvanizing people at scale to make a difference in ways that were unimaginable even a decade ago. So support one of our entrepreneurs, go check them out, or start your own. But let's come together, use our citizen power to change the world. Thank you. So that's my perspective about what's happening with tech and citizen organization, citizen power. So just one more thing before we open up to dialogue. I'd love to share an example of this movement that we've been talking about. This is a video clip from the Jubilee Project that I mentioned earlier, and it's their way of raising awareness and action about an issue that they're particularly passionate about. So let's roll this and then we'll have a chance to talk about it in a moment.
This love is catching me by surprise. Your eyes that look in a million times. A million times. Your heart beats to the beat of mine. We stop in time 'cause the feeling is right. Feeling like the weight of the world is lifted. Nothing that we can't overcome. Make it, we'll make it. Leaving it all just to go to the other side. Held it together tight, great. Everything was falling apart in my head. This love is catching me by surprise. Reach out to find all the feelings inside of you. Here to hold me tight. Your heart beats to the beat of mine.
He said the back was a paper.
I'm sorry, honey. Maybe I talk to them. She was talking to people face to face. This is really sweet, though. I'll make sure she gets it.
As This love is catching me by surprise. Your eyes look it a million times. A million times.
Yes, when you're really trying to film powerfulness, it's on the core about how we make the film or how we make the film, because that's behind the scenes in your blog. So in this video, please learn from us. We would like to make your voices heard on this very important issue by joining the Autism Peace campaign. Learn more of the social office about. And if honestly, you have clarity teachers here. And you need to get yours at EIS.com. Remember, who gets the news? Keep going.
So the sound was hard to hear a little bit at the end, but what the team from the Julie Project was pointing to was a campaign to raise more awareness and a way to get immediately involved and join the campaign. And they had, of course, t-shirts and other things that they were selling for sales. But the Julie Project, some of their videos, and check them out if you want to follow them, have gotten 8 million views on YouTube around some issues, a whole new way of thinking about a media company and thinking about how to drive impact and sort of leverage multimedia and connection in a different way. So think about how you lean into this and participate. You know, whether you're on the Twitter sphere after the State of the Union speech by President Obama, or whether you play fantasy football, a whole different way of connecting with others while you're playing sports, or whether you want to join the Harry Potter Alliance. It's a group of people that love the films and the values in Harry Potter, and they're actually organizing as activists around the country on issues like equal pay and anti-discrimination. Think about your screen life and your voice and how you can contribute and really leverage your citizen power as part of this movement. That's what I'd love to leave you with. I'd like to, I think we have some time now for questions and maybe, half an hour to have some discussion. So I'd love to start maybe by asking you to connect with the person next to you, so in groups of 2. We're the Civic Accelerator, so we're about civic connection. So let's start with some conversation. Talk a little bit about why you think this Jubilee Project, Fireflies video is an example. How is that different from the traditional ways of organizing people and getting people to get interested around issues and to act together? How is it different from traditional media? So find someone next to you. I'm going to give you a few minutes. How is this more powerful or not more powerful? Think about and talk about what is this doing that's a little bit different, and how is it approaching messaging and marketing in a whole different way. And then I'm going to call out and would love some of you to contribute and see what you talked about. So find the person you're going to talk to, pick the person that's going to go first, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to have conversation. You share what your ideas are, then I'll tell you when to switch, and have the second person share theirs, and then let's shout out at the end. Ready? Connect with someone now for a few minutes. I'll tell you when to switch. Or 3 if you want to do 3.
Trying to connect with people and get them to donate.
You should be talking or listening to someone. Okay, if you haven't switched, switch over to the other person. If you haven't heard the other person's perspective.
You're the new person and trying to be friends. And it's all about them finding the I think that's
Okay, so hopefully you've both had a chance to talk. You've talked in a group. What are some ideas that you had? Throw out some ideas or what's your perspective about why this is different? Why is this different from traditional marketing or media? What's different about it or powerful about it, if anything? Shout it out. What do folks talk about? I heard a lot of talking, so. What's different about their approach? Or provocative? Or not? Yeah, please.
This is something that would be shared on Facebook as opposed to letters that you obviously wouldn't be.
Yeah.
There's probably tons of.
Exactly. So this would be shared more on Facebook. It probably has tons of views. It's more visual, right? And and you can connect with it. Yeah. What else? Yeah, please.
I feel like because they use children and because it's a visual, people it's easier to perceive visual things and people remember it because it's a visual thing. So I think traditionally what you do is you maybe send out letters or you post it or make codes and people can perceive whatever they want, but when they see it visually it connects to them and it's an emotional video, so it connects you emotionally towards their project.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good marketing technique.
No, thank you. That's great insight. And also that emotional connection and hearing from the kids directly versus hearing about someone else talking about the kids or someone else talking about what autism is, actually seeing it played out. What else? What else did you notice? And this is an example of the kinds of shifts that are happening in marketing and media. I mean, you touched on scale. It'll reach a lot more people a lot more quickly. So the viral component, yeah.
Well, I feel like it's more effective too, being on YouTube because you have to search for it rather than it just being right in front of you. It's not an ad that pops up. So it's something that someone would have to be personal about to start off with rather than just know about it from someone else. It could transfer from word of mouth, but then they go look for it on their own. So they have their own interest right from the get-go rather than getting it as they're going.
And that's a great point. It's not saying here's a video about autism, right? Or let's have a conversation about diversity, right? It's not. It's saying it's called Fireflies. It's about the relationship and sort of people accessing, maybe even getting into it without even knowing what it's about. So it's a whole different way of bringing to life an issue that other people who may not even be thinking or caring about it, would be attracted to and find. To your point. Any other thoughts that you came up with? Yeah, storytelling, Lynn. Yeah. So, the research that has shown that the way that we absorb information is most effective through storytelling and having an arc of a story and having some drama and having some challenge in the story and moving through some emotion in the story. It's the way that we process information as human beings. And it's much more compelling than seeing statistics Even though the statistics, if I shared with you the number of kids, the 1 in 8 kids who are being diagnosed with autism, that's a shocking statistic, but it's only through the storytelling, sort of seeing it come to life, that it makes it much more effective. And this is an example of technology and how technology is fundamentally changing reach and access, and how things that used to be passive, watching something or telling someone, there's an action oriented to it. It's trying to promote you to act. You feel the emotion, you go through the story and you act, and you say, I want to be a part of that, or I want to share it, or I want to do something. So trying to get you to action. A lot of the research around what does it take for people to act? What does it take for you to take an hour of your life and go mentor a kid? What are all the steps that it takes to get people to actually act and look up from their phones, look up from what you're doing every day, and do something for someone else, do something that connects you to something bigger? It's a whole lot of steps that leads you up to that. And what the Jubilee Project and others are doing is they're compressing those steps online quicker, so that you can move very quickly to awareness and understanding to action. So really, really interesting shifts that are happening in how to mobilize people. So I want to ask you another question and ask you to have another set of conversations. Then we're going to open it up for questions from all of you. So find another partner. Move to your right. If you're talking to someone on your left, talk to someone behind you. Talk to someone else. A few more minutes. And talk about where have you personally used your own citizen power? What have you participated in that would not have been imaginable 10 years ago? Using technology, connecting to something bigger than yourself. Have you used your purchasing power in a different way that's related to a cause? Have you used your voice in a different way? Have you volunteered? Have you connected with someone in a whole different way? How have you voted and shared who you voted for in a different way? How have you used your own citizen power? What's an example of that you actually have used or seen used? Talk about that, and then between both of you, share with one another, and then I'm going to nominate the one that's the most innovative, where you really think it's a game changer that you participated in. Okay? So a couple minutes. Find someone different to talk with, and where have you engaged online in a way that you wouldn't have 10 years ago? And I'm calling that citizen power, citizen engagement. You wouldn't have called that necessarily, but how is that, what has that felt like? What did you do? Why did you do it? Share some examples with one another for a couple minutes, and then we're going to, I'd love to hear from you on some of those examples and how technology is actually shifting the way we behave. So go ahead, start now, pick someone else to have that conversation with, and pick the first person that you want to go and start. You're in the same group. That's all right, it's okay.
It's like an app when you just connect it to your bank and you can literally just like text people money. Yeah, like it's actually just like basically like texting money, so it's like so convenient. You don't have to like have cash or anything. Yeah. Yeah, I can show you. And it just if the person has it, it's called Venmo. Yeah, that's how you spell it. But yeah, like one time they were doing a fundraiser thing, and I was sending my rent money to my roommate, and
You've done all that from here.
asked like, do you want to donate $1 to? And like you have to face like cash registers and like stuff like that, but that was like a different way, and it was so easy for me because I didn't have to like physically give over anything and press yes. So that's the only thing I think of. Yeah, it's so easy.
What's happening? Does like different childhood activities, or I could say neighborhood activities. Yeah. Old folks come and like do like older people or Christmas. I used to do like a whole thing. Yeah.
Switch over, if you haven't already, to the other person, and then I would love to hear, or talk about which one you think is the most compelling.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's really.
Yeah. It is like more personal. You can always just donate more. Yeah. How we just saw like with the extra story, put more like emotion to it, more connection, like emotion. Some people when it's online it's like.
Okay, would love to hear some examples of what examples did you come up with? What examples did you share where you've personally used technology in a whole different way to mobilize or connect? To actually behave differently than even a couple years ago. What examples came up for you? Yeah, please.
Well, a few years ago, after the Sandusky scandal occurred, there was a candlelight vigil for the victims, and that was all planned within a few hours, and they got thousands of people to go out. So it was all over social media. People were able to spread it with their friends really quick.
That's a great example. So sort of mobilizing in a way for something that people cared about quickly. And when you take a look at what happened in Egypt and around the Middle East and how quickly flash mobs sort of come together for positive change, it's really interesting how Twitter enabled a revolution in some countries. And that's what they were doing. They were just quickly mobilizing on the streets. That's awesome. Yeah. Other examples? Where else have you used technology or seen it or participated where you as a citizen were participating in a very different way than you would have? Yes, Pam.
Here locally, the Center Community Foundation has a thing that they call Center Gives, and it happens every May. And so old school, I used to write out checks to all the individual philanthropies that I wanted to give money to, but now you can go online, and every nonprofit locally who registers can build their own profile page on the thing, and donate to just one or several of them, all right online.
That's great. It's a great example, and you think about how the efficiencies of that and what the impact of that has been on nonprofits, but also on donors. And the hypothesis there is you'd get more donors and small donors to participate because it's easier. Build your base. That's great. Yeah, great example. Any others? What's the coolest thing that you have been part of?
Ask them about fonts. Somebody can tell you about
I don't even know what that's. Okay, so songs, really? All right. All right, because I was going to say. All right, good, because I was going to say, if we're going to go there. Who has an example? Anybody? Come on now. Insight. Huh? Yes.
I don't know if this counts not, but for my job, I have to talk to people through screen from another country, and sometimes English is not both of our first languages. So to learn about each other, we will look up things about ourselves on our cellular devices and show us to communicate what we know about each other.
Oh wow! Really, really cool. So so communicating using technology, Skype-like, iMeet, other video technology, but not even being able to speak the same language, but being able to connect in a different way by showing visuals or using your cell phone. That's really interesting. We had a startup come out of our accelerator called Condoma that is in the iPhone App Store now, and Nickelodeon supporting it. But it's reading a book online for parents who are incarcerated or in the Army, right? Or in our services around the world and can't be with their kids. You can actually physically turn pages and point to words, and it brings it to life. And the research they've shown is if you're on Skype with a young child, they'll last about 10 to 20 seconds. You know, it's not engaging, there's nothing there, but that reading and turning the page and pointing and engaging, kids stay on the phone for an hour with their parents. And think about the impact of that. If you haven't seen your mother or father, they've been incarcerated for years, and that connection. So really interesting new way of connecting. Yes?
What is that app called?
Kindoma, Kindoma. Thank you. Yeah, very cool. Just check it out. Great. Questions that you may have, either about some of what I was sharing around our insights, and we're particularly interested in this because we're an organization that's about social change and organizing and galvanizing and supporting people. That's the civic part of the Civic Accelerator. So questions about that, or other questions that you have about innovation and technology, entrepreneurship. What can we talk about? What interests you?
Ayesha,
Yes.
can you also remember to repeat the question?
And I'll repeat the question. Yeah. Yes, I will repeat the question so that we're streaming so that other folks can hear it. So what interests you about this area? You stayed, you're still here.
We have a question from Poll Everywhere, actually.
Yeah.
One is, do any of Civic Accelerator's ventures become full-blown companies?
Yeah, so the question about do any of them scale? We focus on pretty early stage startups. So they are, may have a little bit of revenue, or they may have some customers, or a prototype or a beta, but they still have got to figure some things out in their business model. And we support both nonprofit and for-profit startups. So that's very unusual in the accelerator world. We're about 3 years in, so now some of those have graduated 2.5 years ago, and yes, for us, scale doesn't just mean they had an exit. I think a lot of those days may be going in any case. We're not looking for the next Twitter, but scale for us means, did you acquire more customers? Are you growing revenue? Have you brought on a board of directors? What's your scale in terms of impact and number of people that you've actually reached and impacted? So yes, several of our ventures have done a second round of funding. Several of them have got grants. The nonprofits have got grants. And about 1/3 of them are moving on a trajectory where they're having more of an impact, engaging more customers. It's actually really exciting to see. And we keep in touch with all of our graduates. 61 teams have gone through the accelerator to date. Thank you. Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering how early these projects usually get into the accelerator. Like, is it kind of an idea stage, or is it when there's already been some work and a team's been assembled?
Yeah, it's a really good question about what's the right stage when do ventures get accepted into accelerators. And the interesting thing about this market right now is that there's more of us that are intermediaries. So we're an intermediary in the market. We're connecting founders of for-profit and nonprofit with capital, or with mentors, or with partners. And so accelerators, incubators, hubs are all intermediaries in this space. So there's a lot of different models. So some accelerators look for an idea and are only tech. That's where this came from. Our accelerator is more interested in a combination of the entrepreneur and the venture. So there has to be an idea that has some traction, has some proof of concept, not just an idea with one person. You have to have attracted someone else to the idea. So you've got to be full-time, and someone else has got to be full-time. You can be a board member, it doesn't have to be another staff member, but so we're a little bit farther along than just an idea. But there are also fellowships that focus more on the individual, Ashoka and Echoing Green and others that will focus on helping support innovators. So if you want to build your own skills as an individual, there are programs that are focused on that. Accelerators tend to be focused on accelerating growth of a startup and helping you, when you graduate from our startup in 3 months, you're investment ready, you're ready to scale, you're ready to go out and get that first investment. So you're doing a lot of change in the 3 months that you're with us. And frankly, many of these startups change significantly over those 3 months. It's an intensive national process. But they're all different. And, there are some intermediaries that help you define what your real issue is that you're working on. And those are helpful, but they're not going to give you funding. You're not ready for that yet. You're just trying to shape and form your issue to see if there's anything even there. So the other thing I would just share is an idea without any proof that it's an idea that will work. It's hard to get that accepted into any of these kinds of programs. So if you haven't figured out what need or pain point you're trying to solve and who cares about that and is willing to fund it or subsidize it if you're a nonprofit, then it's hard to get into any of these programs. And sometimes it takes years to get that, and sometimes it takes a couple months. Depends how formed your idea is and how much quickly you can test it. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
No, sure. Other questions? Yes, sorry.
How do we get involved in the startup? Like, how do we apply, or how's the process?
To a startup?
Yeah, like to the one you're going to.
Okay, so how would you get involved in the accelerator?
Yeah.
We, like other accelerators, publish a very detailed set of requirements. And so for us, you have to have, we have 7 criteria we use. You have to have an idea that you've proved and you've seen some movement and traction and you've got some customer feedback. And so you've tested it a little bit and you've got a team, at least another person around you. And for us, it's important that it has a social impact and that it's civic, that it involves people in some way, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, engaging volunteers, connecting with people, purchasing on a platform, some way that people are contributing. So every different program has a set of what they're looking for. So for us, it's pretty specific. And we go around the country and we have scouts around the country that are trying to identify and pull the right entrepreneurs into the program so that it's a good fit for them and for us. So I don't know if that answered your question about how to get involved. Yeah. I mean, the key is if this is really energizing you, this field, and we had a couple student teams they were seniors still in college that went through, 2 of them. One was at Cornell and one was at University of Maryland. But they had worked weekends, and were actually starting something and had something tangible that they had developed. And as they were graduating, they wanted to really focus full time on it. Full time is key for us. You've got to have made the leap that you're going to spend your time doing it. Otherwise, it's a hobby, which is not a bad thing. It just hasn't gotten there yet. Any other questions about your career path, your interests, skills, what you're learning, building here?
We have another from
Yeah,
Twitter,
sure.
actually.
Okay.
It says, you first began your career at Anderson. How did your experiences as a consultant lead you to the direction your career path is in now?
Yeah. So, I'm actually a psychologist by training, believe it or not. But I've moved around a lot. I started in for-profit in the strategy group. That was Anderson Consulting at the time. It's now Accenture in New York City. And I was there for 9 years. And that was a great start to a career for me because it taught me a lot of analytical skills and how to work with people and how to take a lot of data and figure out what's relevant and how to work on teams. And I moved around a lot. And so in consulting, you see a lot of different businesses. And we talked about this a little bit, Becky, when we were talking about careers earlier. So it's a great way to quickly build skills and get a sense of what you're good at and what you do well and get to know yourself and develop broad skills that can lead you anywhere. I had worked in India and had worked with kids, as you saw, who had cerebral palsy, and I had built village healthcare centers in India. And for me, after 9 years at Accenture, I realized there's something else. It's not fulfilling for me. Like there's something deep that I was missing. So the social side of the work. So I started my own business, and then one of my clients was a nonprofit, and I got really connected to their mission, and I joined them part-time in their number 2 position, and then the CEO left, and I just went for it to be their CEO. So in some ways, I just followed what pulled me and my interest, but I was really fortunate to have built skills at Anderson Consulting first that I use every day and I apply every day. I don't know, is that getting to the question? Yeah. So for me, it wasn't like I wanted to be here and I kept moving towards that goal. That is not the way my career went. And who knows where I'll be in a couple years. So that's the fun of it, I guess. And you'll be the same. You're going to have many more careers, certainly, than I do. That's what the research tells us. So it's good to build foundational skills, which you're doing here, but in the work that are broader. I guess the only other thing I would share is I tried to stay really broad as a generalist first before specializing. I only started to specialize later in my career, and that for me was very helpful because I got to see a lot of different things, and I wasn't making a choice yet about this is where I want to focus. I was building broad skills that I could apply to anything. And I think your first job out, that is for what it's worth, that's my advice, to build broad skills as a generalist before you get too focused. Because once you get focused, you've just shut a whole bunch of doors and you're going to go in that direction. And I don't know that you want to do that when you're too young. There's a lot out there. Maybe last question before we wrap up. So maybe I'll ask you a question too. Yeah, Becky, is there one?
We just wanted to ask this to all our speakers. Could you share with us what you believe the next big thing or the next wave will be in your industry?
I do think the way people are organizing as communities online is a huge shift that's happening around the country. Folks, they didn't imagine that it was serving the purpose that it would. So these technologies are enabling people to connect around issues in a whole different way and to act that wasn't even envisioned before in the beginning. I do think that's the next big thing. How are we, because that's what makes us human, that's not going to go away. And it's just beginning. It's just starting, that sort of human connection and translating that online. So I do think that's the big new thing. I don't think the big new thing is a new product or a big new, silver bullet. I just think the way we're behaving and changing as people is really in a huge shift right now. Take a look at what's happening around Black Lives Matter and some of the issues in Ferguson and going around the country and how that's come to light and how people have engaged in that conversation. Totally different than 5 years ago, right? So really social change and how it happens. Look at the gay rights and how quickly that has moved in this country. Unbelievable what has happened around that. Tech-enabled and policy and strategy, but tech-enabled, those changes. So social changes are happening at a much faster rate in a very different way, and I think that's interesting. So I would love you to think about, as we wrap up, how you can stay connected and engaged and use your citizen power. We have tools, more tools than have ever been available in all of humanity at our fingertips. Never before have people been so enabled and had so many resources than you. You in this room have more resources than ever before in our history and have access to incredible technology and information. How are you using it to do good? How are you using it? And what role are you playing given these issues that we're facing as a community? Huge, deep issues. So I'm really inspired by all you are doing and will do, and I hope you can at least take away from this my challenge to you to really use your citizen power. We need you to make a difference. Thanks so much. It was really fun to be with you, and good luck. Good luck.